My name is Kycell Bakshi, and I've hit a deadly snag in my 17 chapters long pursuit of the forgotten Minotaur King. The looks on Tristafe Myrink and Ahani Rau's faces when I told them what had happened after Kind and I left the city was heartbreaking. My mouseling and half-dwarf companions had been growing closer with the Minotaur mayor of Goldenrod these last few days, just as I have. However, neither was new to this kind of grim fortune, considering Dar and the others we have lost even before making it to this city on our journey. However, the look of adulation on our young orc captive's face, Chomsky, was a much more irritating and upsetting sight.
I told you guys not to mess with me. I knew they'd come for me. Best do what they said, right?
Anger flowed from me like it never had before. My friends had been in danger on this, my personal pursuit in the past. But a friend's child, and them getting maimed in such a way, it was all still a shock. I was prepared to shout in anger at the orc when the loud sound of metal against flesh rang out through the Vigabane tombs we were hiding in. Myrink had taken the second I had took to prepare a verbal assault and simply unholstered her sidearm and bashed the barrel into the back of the orc's skull, sending him face first into the solid stoned ground and into unconsciousness. She looked on the verge of tears with an irascible glower plastered on her face. In another swift motion, she had the young orc's legs in a wheelbarrow hold and was dragging him to the stone door housing the undead Vigabane legions. She wordlessly kicked in the door, and with a giant swing one wouldn't think possible for a mouseling 3/4 the orc's considerable size, tossed him into the dark abyss beyond the door we knew was populated with dozens of potentially violent skeletons. We could only hear the scuttle of bony feet as Myrink quickly closed the door behind her and turned to Ahani and myself.
We aren't giving those bastards anything, especially that horrible little runt. Now, let's get back to town and figure out what we do next.
As we trudged over the hill and through the golden flowers surrounding the city, we began to talk amongst ourselves. I pointed out the innkeeper told the Rajalasad thugs of Kind and where he lived, but we don't know if he told them our description, which would possibly lead to that other larger orc, Hansk, remembering us, and that Fugazi creature ripping us to shreds if the prince didn't find us first. Ahani was now properly scared and posited the idea of us getting our belongings from the inn's rubble first, then finding somewhere else to lay low until Kind was better, if he was going to get better. That was when a slightly sorrowful Myrink pointed out, since I had been there moments ago with Kind, and she being a mouseling, a race we hadn't encountered another member of since we arrived in town, our best bet for a subtle infiltration would be Ahani, since humans and some subspecies of dwarf seemed common in this region. A skeptical look crossed Ahani's face for a brief moment, but she reluctantly nodded as we huddled in the outskirts of the city border. She gave me and Myrink a dutiful nod, and began to make her way through the city and to the inn. Myrink now turned to me.
With the inn now being out, where do we stay while we think of a plan?
My first suggestion was Kind's mayoral mansion. It was the only other place our group had been welcome since our arrival, and we didn't have many other options. However, she correctly pointed out, wasn't that where the goons first encountered us and assaulted Kind? That would make it a likely place for them to return, and therefore not safe. I then remembered the elderly woman that had told me of the medical school in the area. She seemed to live on her own and was a bit out of it, so we could potentially stay with her. Tristafé then brought up the niece she mentioned could be a dependent and turn them in for her aunt's safety or something. Finally, I offered the only other person I could think of. What about the medical students of the university? When I first recruited Myrink and Ahani to my expedition, they had stayed in my communal dorm when we were on the run from the orc Hansk. If this city's school offered similar housing, maybe we could ask the students for another kindness, in addition to aiding us in the mayor's recovery. Myrink mulled it over for a few moments and nodded in agreement. We waited in hiding for a few more moments before a nearly empty-handed Ahani returned. She regretfully informed us the inn's remains must have been ransacked by looters, or else the Regelissad's enforcers themselves. Only a few bits of clothes were left on the scene. All I could think to myself was, could this day get any worse? We took our meager belongings and made our way back to the Palamedes University. And once again, the familiar campus reminded me of my days in school, which now seemed so long ago. Given all I've experienced these last few months, I ushered Ahani and Myrink to the medical entrance I had entered with the technician students and the Rougarou that took notes on the events, hoping that quite libidinous pink-scaled Lamia doctor would have good news for us and possibly information on where to stay. As we passed through the swinging doors and back into the clean, white porcelain walls of the medical center, I was contented to see my partners had the same odd reaction I had. As we came to the operating room I had left Kind in, I began to recall that my professor had mentioned the excellent medical and mental health facilities Goldenarod was known for. That offhanded bit of information now seemed incredibly fortuitous, now in retrospect. The curtain to where I had left Kind was drawn closed, and many silhouetted figures passed and slithered back and forth behind it. The distinct foreign accents of the Rougarou and the Lamia, along with a few others I could only assume were additional staff, communicated at a reassuringly hurried yet controlled manner. thinking it best to stay out of their way while they worked was in kind and my own best interest. I simply stayed in the hallway and waited for any word or exiting staff. We stood outside the operating room for what felt like hours. Myrink paced the halls with a watchful eye for any potential pursuers. Ahani looked over the notes on Krunturg I sloppily took in her absence when Kind and myself first returned to town, and against my very own will, I sloped in exhaustion and gave myself over to sleep. I was jostled awake by the furry white claw of Myrink. I immediately jumped to my feet as I once again was confronted with the Lamia doctor. Her physician's robe and floor-length smock she hadn't worn before were drenched in what I could only deduce was Kind's blood. She was wiping glove-covered hands on her smock and looked at me with vibrant blue eyes and offered a polite grin.
The mayor will make it. We saved and reattached his horn, binded his arms and wrists in curatively enhanced bandages, and the stab wound will be easily mended in no time.
I couldn't help but enthusiastically leap for joy at this news. Even Myrink and Ahani engaged in a celebratory hug and cheer. We began to attempt to enter the room, but Dr. Silibin held a scaly fuchsia palm in protest.
He has yet to regain consciousness, and likely won't for a few days, if not weeks. We aren't fully acquainted with Minotaur metabiology, despite the rumored history of this kingdom, and without the school faculty, we are even less prepared for potential setbacks.
For a second, I faltered. I asked what she meant without faculty. However, before she began, I recalled a comment this Dr. Psychosilibin had made when I brought Kind in. The school staff were all at the Mindus Castle, and examinations for the school were cancelled. I was beginning to grow even more concerned and awaited Psycha to elaborate. Was she the only operating physician?
Well, currently we have no medical staff at this school. The crowned Regalistad heir and Prince of Wolfkeep called upon them and many other professionals in the town to arrive at the castle so they could be recruited for personal staff of the royal entourage. I and my nurse Estelise, who you met when you brought Minotaur Kind to us, are prefects, student advisors. You have no need to worry. We are highly trained and well versed in the medical field.
While I was still mildly unnerved at this news, Myrink seemed almost livid, and it was only the quick action of Ahani stepping between my mouseling bodyguard and the well-meaning snake-like medical student that prevented any further bloodshed. Ahani asked Psycha if the school offered public housing, seeing as the culprits of Kind's assault were still about, and the kingdom's primary inn was destroyed. She also added, we would like to stay as close with the mayor during his recovery as possible. Another grin spread across Psycha's face, this one nearly showing her dulled fangs at the corner of her mouth.
Well, I see my somewhat dubious decision to not fully explain the school faculty's situation was maybe not even for the best. Please, you are welcome to stay in my and Estelisa's dorm for the time being, or until the mayor is back on his feet. Or hooves.
I offered profuse thanks, and after getting directions from Psycha as to the location on campus, I turned, and with help from Ahani, forcefully removed Myrink from the premises for the time being. We came to a brick building that didn't seem dissimilar to almost every other house or structure our party had come across these last few days in Goldenrod. As we approached the door and ascended the stairs, Myrink turned to me with a fixated expression.
Do you remember that idiotic plan to infiltrate the Mindas castle you told us last night?
I nodded knowingly.
Give me all of the details.
Hi, my name is Matthew Lewis, and I do the voice of Kycell Bakshi along with all the additional voices in The Forgotten Minotaur King. I hope you enjoy the podcast and continue to listen into the future. If you want to support my content, please donate to my Patreon, Matthew Lewis Podcasts. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Matthew Lewis Podcasts, all one word. Follow me on Twitter at Matthew Lewis P. Or leave a positive maximum star review on your podcast app of choice. If you found this podcast, I assume you're familiar enough with the genre to know how important reviews are to the survival of a channel. And I hope you recommend this to your friends. Or if you didn't like it, you could recommend it to your enemies, and I'll teach them a lesson. Keep it sleazy, folks, and thank you.